century. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't just do one final slide on safety and nuclear radiation, or rather 2 slides. Nuclear generation, and I'm going to make some bold statements which you may challenge me on later. It is the safest way known to man and womankind of generating electricity. There is no question about that. Whatever you may have heard, it is the safest way by any measure that you've ever met. There have been accidents, but really very few when you think about it over 50 years. There's been one in Chernobyl, which was really operator error and on a very old-fashioned design reactor. That caused roughly 35 deaths to people when that happened. And they were very brave people that did this, because they were the firefighters that actually cooled down the reactor when the first accident occurred. And they got big, heavy doses of radiation, and they died very shortly after the Chernobyl accident. In Fukushima, you're all familiar with that, but I'd like to say there have been no deaths from radiation at Fukushima, none at all. And so these are I think the 2 most conspicuous accidents that you all know about. Moreover, from those accidents, and there was releases of radiation, there's no evidence for any long-term health effects from radiation. There have been a lot of health effects, however, from the stress that was induced by mass evacuations, as in Fukushima, and from the stress that was induced by the publicity and the reporting in the press that went on, and the actions of various countries too in what they were doing about evacuations. They all added to enormous stress levels and worry levels, which actually, when you look at it calmly and carefully, haven't any foundation in any radiation effects. This is the big problem. This is really a very small problem, if any problem at all. And I'm afraid we are responsible for it. All of us have been in the nuclear business for the last 50 years or so, because we have been forced for lots of different reasons. There have been a lot of misconception about the unsafety of nuclear power, and it's really due to 50 years of very poor and wrong information propagation. It's a big burden that we carry, and I think it's something we've got to address to get right, because I believe that these nuclear options that I've outlined for you are an absolutely ingredient for solving the climate change and the energy problems of the 21st century. So we've got to do this, but it's a big, big job. We've got to change people's mindsets over it. There are a lot of work has gone in over the years to the actual safety of nuclear sites. And there are 3 things you have to worry about. One is safety, one is security, and one is safeguards. 3 S's they're often known as. And these are to make sure that, for instance, safeguards, that no fissile material disappears. That's proliferation, right? The safety that nothing goes wrong in the plant, and security that you can't have terrorists come in and steal some of the fissile material. By the way, it is very, very difficult to steal anything from a nuclear reactor site that is of any use to anybody who wants to to proliferate nuclear weapons. They have to be a very highly sophisticated state, right, to be able to do that. It's not somebody who can do that in their backyard. We have, in fact, there's an enormous push to open up and to be very transparent about all of this process so that you can build some confidence. You can do it. I'm confident that you can do all of this. It's actually been done, right, for the last 50 or 60 years. So it is not a surprise to us that you can do it, therefore going on into the future. But it is something that you never should forget about, right? And can be designed into it. The problems with, you can over-design. And when you over-design, you have to make these things as safer and safer and safer and safer and safer than as anybody has ever conceived of before. Then, of course, you pile on one thing after another onto them and make the electricity that you will generate from them more and more expensive. And it's actually, I think, unreasonable. You have to do it correctly, but it's unreasonable. So, I'm going to finish. Just last 2 slides. Nuclear power, as far as I'm concerned, and I hope you will be sure of it as well, it offers for the foreseeable future a secure and sustainable supply of carbon-free and cheap electricity in a safe manner. You've got to use to do that over the period of the 21st century, I believe, thermal reactors that we have now, fast fission breeder reactors, and the possibility of fusion reactors. So there's a gradation in what you can deploy at the moment and what you might be able to deploy in the future. And you're only going to be able to do that and provide that key ingredient in solving the carbon emission problem for the 21st century. You can only do that if you keep your vision there and make a concerted effort to do it and do lots of R&D. That's a theme that you have heard me saying lots of times in this talk. That's the way one has to go for nuclear power. It's doable. Lots of clever brains can work on this, and they can make sure that we have a major component of our energy supplies. So what about the total view of the safe, secure and sustainable energy? Well, yes, you can use fossil fuels. You'll use fossil fuels as part of it. I don't see how you'll get away from fossil fuels at some level. But if you want to use them in any large way, you have got to develop and install carbon capture and sequestration on a massive scale. And that's not being costed into our costs at all, really in depth. Yes, you can do, renewables are going to make an amazingly important contribution to this. But along with them comes the need to develop backups, because they won't be operating all the time, and storage. Yes, you can have your sustainable energy if you with nuclear fission and you develop and install fast reactors and fusion. Right? And at the same time, as you do these things, generating the electricity, you really want to cut back the consumption and increase the efficiency of everything you do, so that you can make the job up here somewhat easier if you've got to supply less energy. So I think it's possible, but it's going to require all of us, all around the world, putting our brains to this and implementing the solutions all the way around the world. It's a real global challenge. And I think that's the way we've got to face up to it, and the more we think about it and think of going that route, the better. Thank you very much.